Hello and welcome in another Better Leaders show today on LinkedIn Live. And today I am talking to Tom van der Lubbe, my friend Tom. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Anno.
And we have been talking with each other for quite some time now. We do, for example, a bi-weekly book podcast where we read and discuss books for entrepreneurs. So we talk a lot, and but I've also talked with you a couple of times in my own podcast, the Decide for Impact podcast, where we talked about the way that you organize your business. So you are a co-founder of Viisi Mortgages. But why is it so special? What's your organization style? How does it look like?
Yeah, thanks, Erno. It's interesting just to, although we speak so much to each other, and nearly 100 books we reviewed, just to talk about, let's say, the company and our professional topics in this setting. So thanks for the invitation. What is special? That was your question. To give a very short and simple answer, is that we work with Holacracy, or to put it very simple, decentralized decision making. So we think that people are able to take their own decisions in their own roles or in their own profession or in their own teams together.
So this podcast is for leaders, for people who want to become a better leader in their work, in their private environment. But what is so different about Holacracy, and do you have leaders in your company?
Yeah, we believe that in the end, everybody is a leader. So just to give a very simple example, if you take our credit department, so those are the people who, let's say, correct and support our advisors. These are three, and in a couple of weeks, four people, because one colleague will come back. Those people decide themselves, for instance, about if they hire somebody, they decide who will be the next colleague in their team, but they also decide how the work is done, because they are specialists in their field. And then the other thing is that this rotation principle, if you take about leadership, those four people, they all have, let's say, the responsibility of coordination in this team for a certain period of time. So very simple. Everybody, if you have four people, everybody is half a year in charge of a team. Like you know this, for instance, in software or the project teams, and there is no managing role with a higher salary. So these four colleagues all have their normal salaries, and they just take this kind of leadership, take it as another responsibility. But because everything is, let's say, a kind of common topic, the role of being a leader or so-called manager is very, very small, because the classical decision-making processes of a manager, who says how to do the work and who to hire and etc., is not there, because they decide together about these topics.
Okay, that's in the team, but as founders, you have four founders. What kind of leadership roles are there? What kind of management roles are there?
Yeah, that's just a different role. So let's say, as founders, we have a shareholder role. So if you would dive into it, it's just open the whole Holacracy software, Glassfrog software, is just in the. Perhaps we even could put it on the screen if we would like to. You could dive into this, so everybody has access. You can just Google Viisi and then Glassfrog, and then dive into this structure, and then you would have a shareholder role, and we as co-founders all have the shareholder role, but that's separated from just a normal our normal roles in the company. And then in the company, as employees, so we are shareholders, but we are just normal employees. We just have certain roles in the company. But being a co-founder doesn't mean that somebody has to be in charge of a certain topic.
Okay, to make it easier for the people watching now, because I don't think most people know how this works. I'm gonna do this. So this is on Glassfrog how you've organized. So you have at the right here. I hope you can see my mouse moving at the top right.
But it would be better to click outside of the recruiting circle, and
Right.
then the company becomes bigger.
Right.
And then you click outside of people first, and then because people first is the HR team, and then here you see the normal operations, the entity Viisi NV. So Viisi NV is the advising company, but if you would click outside of Viisi, then you have the Viisi group, and then there you have the shareholder role in this Viisi group structure. But these are shareholder issues. And you have for somebody who supports the shareholder, but there's the shareholder role itself, and then you have the shareholders. The shareholders have certain shareholder responsibilities. And then, for instance, that's interesting. Here you have, for instance, the role is called shareholders come first. Why is it called not only shareholders, but shareholders come first? Because we have a hierarchy in our organization. So it's people first, that are the people who work in the company. Clients come second, and shareholders come last. So that means, for instance, just as an example, practical example or also actual example, as we had to do a turnaround at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, shareholders had to stop. We stopped our own salaries first. So before we started the discussion about layoffs, we stopped our own salaries, I think in October or November. And then, so shareholders have the obligation to act first and be an example. But in the other way, in the normal situation, we come last. So if the whole logic behind this is if people who work in the company are happy, clients will be happy, and then afterwards also the company will successful, and then like dividends or growth, the shareholders would be also happy. But everybody who is interested can just dive into this or see from, okay, what does Tom van der Lubbe do in this company? And then you have Tom van der Lubbe, and you could see all my roles I have in the company, but I have a few shareholder roles, but the rest doesn't have anything to do with my shareholder, let's say, role.
So just to be clear, so I'm going to just put it up here. This is Tom. This is all your roles.
Yeah.
It's a Dutch company, so a lot of things are probably in Dutch as well. So you may not read it, but I've just opened a browser page, looked up Viisi, Viisi, and Glassfrog. So it's open to the public. Everybody can read, like I do now on the screen, what Tom's roles are. So it's a completely transparent way of working, not just internally, but also externally.
Yeah, the funny thing is that when we put this open, because radical transparency not only exists in the company, it only exists outside of the company. Then people send us emails and said, do you know your Glassfrog structure is open? And we said, yes. But people thought it was a mistake. But we said, okay, if you want to do radical transparency, that makes sense. And it's a little bit like, let's say, to share information with the public in a democracy. So we think as citizens of a country that there should be access to public information, or there should be access to discussions take place in parliament, etc. Wet openbaarheid bestuur. So there is a law which means that the public should have a possibility of knowing what is going on or how a state is governed. And we have the same thing, or the same logic, it's called radical transparency, and you share everything. So putting the other way around, you can share everything unless, let's say, it's not possible for data reasons. You can't put client data on the internet, or privacy reasons, etc. But all the other stuff is perhaps very small, specific topics. I mean, we don't put our liquidity on the internet, but internally, everybody knows how much money we have. And that helps a lot, because if you know that the stuff is on the internet, you are very well aware that the way you write things should be correct or updated, etc. Because everybody say, "Oh, I saw you do this and that role, but I don't understand." Blah blah blah. So it's always on the actual status. So if you just notice, for instance, that a certain role you don't have it anymore, or the accountabilities have changed, then you also change this in the system, and that works. That works pretty well. And if you, for instance, also in the company, if you want to know, I mean, we're a small company, so I mean, you otherwise also would find out, but you could still see from I have a certain topic, who is responsible, where is the accountability on this topic. So the example I sometimes took, just to have a very practical one, if you, for instance, I'm now talking in the role of a Holacracy evangelist, where your browser is. So if you would, then there would be let's have a look. Where is it? Above, and then it's called sharing experiences, writing of articles, offering people to attend Holacracy meetings, even helping, let's say, competitors to help to implement Holacracy in this kind of things. And then share this knowledge. So that's, for instance, one of the heads I have in let's say in our current discussion. I'm explaining you, or explaining the audience how it works, and then people will perhaps say, "Oh, that's interesting. I would also like to experiment with that."
Yeah, that's why actually a couple of years ago, I came with a couple of my clients to your company to show them how Holacracy works, to think about, so is this something that you can implement in your organization? Because I'm very enthusiastic about it. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is, which a lot of organizations, managers, owners fear, is this transparency, the radical transparency in financial situations. So that if you know a function who is doing what, if you know a role, if you know what somebody's roles are, that's easy to share. That's pretty easy to share. But sharing your financial situation, that's a lot more difficult for most people. And it is really weird, because if you share the financial situation, everybody knows what's going on, and they can make a lot better decisions. They can make most of the decisions on their own. They can decide what they want to spend. They know when it's good time to hire somebody new, if it's affordable, yes or not. And so a lot of things will save you so much time as a founder, as a CEO or CFO, because of the transparency, because people can make decisions with the information that they have. To me, that was one of the interesting things that I like a lot about Holacracy. What I also know, and you are very transparent about this, is, and you mentioned already, last year you had to do a reorganization. You had to lay off some of your staff. In the meantime, you've been hiring back some of those people, but you, I don't want to say took back control, but you were put back into another role. Why did it change that at that time?
That's a big topic with a lot of different dimensions. So first, I will say there is a pretty, let's say, big presentation and also talk about this. It's called Holacracy in Times of Crisis. So that if people want to dive into this topic, they can find, let's say, more information as I can just share now here in a few minutes. But to answer your question about what changed, is that in times of crisis, certain ways of operating change. So just take one example. If you talk about, for instance, rotation, You have in Holacracy kind of principles, and it says, for instance, in our company, it is rotation over experience. So rotation is more important than experience. Why is this defined like that? That in a normal situation, you should give the space to people so they can also gain experience. Because if you always would say the one who has the most experience, then you don't have any changes and other people can't learn and can't gain those experience. So it is in normal times, let's say in the positive times when you build up a company and everything is going smoothly, then it's rotation is important, more important than experience. In times of crisis is exactly the other way around. So, and what happened, and that's quite interesting, that everybody, because of this uh, radical transparency, everybody sees liquidity is going just out of the company. You're losing money every week because this is a metrics on a weekly basis. Everybody can see this every week. It's also actively shared every Tuesday. The numbers of last week, the liquidity of last week, so everybody knows this, and everybody can also click into these Excel slides internally. And then people say, okay, oh my goodness, I see we have a certain liquidity. It takes us so many weeks or so many months, and then we're bankrupt. And then people say, okay, we really have to act. Let's change this principle from rotation over experience to experience over rotation. I mean, it's very academic, theoretical, let's say, way of putting it. What I always try is to take very simple examples. So if you would be sailing on a lake and the weather change, the weather is nice, then somebody who is a good sailor says, for instance, Tom, do you also want to sail a little bit? And I said, I never sailed before. And he says, no problem. The weather is nice. You can also sail a little bit. But when there would be a storm and perhaps even not a really expected storm, and you should getting back to the harbor or getting back this ship in a safe way, then probably it's not a good idea to give Tom the opportunity to learn a little bit of sailing. No, then so everybody would say, sorry, who's the best skipper here on the boat? Could you please bring us back as fast as possible? And everybody understands this. And this is on the one hand, then in a turnaround, people will just look around. Who has done this before? Does it make sense? And then you will, for instance, split also responsibilities. And then you have people who are, let's say, more the rational number crunching people, and these were the responsibilities I had. So the more CEO type of role and the CFO type of role, and then you make a team, and then you add people with different, let's say, experiences and also different strengths. You put them together, but that's still a chosen election. So I was elected in a meeting of let's say, it's called in a circle of this in this tactical, and I said, okay, we've seen the numbers, let's elect again, because you always can ask, we would like to elect or new elections, and then you just build for it's a little bit building a crisis time team. So something happens, and then say, okay, we need a crisis team, and then I don't know if something happens in the city, they would put somebody from the firemen and the police, and I don't know, the people together, say, okay, this is a crisis team. They are in charge for a certain amount of time. And when then the turnaround was over, and we were cash flow positive in February, then I gave, we went back to rotation. And then after half a year, I gave over to Hendrik, who is the lead link at the moment. So I only did this for half a year.
Another interesting topic that always comes up in Holacracy, and there's a number of good books. It was invented in the US, and there's a number of interesting books about this topic. So you can read more about that there. But is having meetings. So most people don't enjoy meetings because there's probably one person mostly talking and the other one's just listening. other people also want to say something, so it takes longer than you expect. So a lot of people in the room take a lot of time, and so like let's say there's 7 people in the room, there's 7 times like an hour that they don't work, so it costs a lot of money. It's not that in Holacracy you don't have meetings anymore, but it's quite different. So why is it? What is so different on the meetings in your organization?
Yeah, different aspects. On the one hand, you're only part of a meeting when you're actually doing work in that team, which is in a lot of companies not the case. So there, in a lot of companies, in meetings, there are people who are not doing the work, but they have an opinion about the work. So let's say, just take this example of the credit team. They have their own team meeting. That would be then the name of our credit department is smooth operations, and that's their purpose. And then they have their tactical meeting. I even don't know. I don't know, every week, perhaps even every day, a very short check-in. I don't know. And those 4 colleagues then are there together and they're discussing the daily business. But nobody else is in this meeting. So that's the first thing. So just take my example. I'm one of you could call the co-founders, right, which is just one role. But I have 3 team meetings a week, and the rest of my calendar is at the beginning of the week, or let's say normally is empty. I mean, then afterwards, I mean, I have stuff which has to be done, but I have 3 fixed meetings. I have a shareholder meeting on Tuesday. That's more strategic. Shall we, let's say, more focus on this or on that? Then I have a people first meeting on Wednesday,
Which is HR.
Which is AR, with 2 colleagues, with Esme and Margie. Nobody else is in the meeting. We discuss how shall we start recruiting again for next year. Shall we put more effort on media, on etc. etc. But we're only 3 people, and on Thursday there is the only operational meeting where all the lead links of all the operational circles are together, and they only discuss stuff which they were not able to solve themselves bilaterally. So you're not going to discuss just everything, all the stuff you just wanted to discuss. No, you only bring stuff to the meeting which you were not able to solve yourself, because you have the power to go anywhere in the company, search for information, ask people, and in those meetings is asked. For instance, Erno has a certain topic, and he said, Erno, what do you need? What do you need from us? And the basis is just go until somebody else says stop. This harms my autonomy or my accountability or my space. But as long as nobody says stop, you can just do what you want. So in the end, and that's very funny, this meeting of, and there's always a lead link and then a rep link. It's a double linking. I mean, it's a little bit technical, but you have always 2 people from one team. So there are 12 people on the table, standing around the table. And then those meetings on a Thursday, most of the time, the check in and check out, just saying, okay, how am I doing? I just focus on this meeting, often takes longer than the actual topics which are discussed in the meeting, which for let's say bystanders or guests, etc., is extremely weird. So if we have guests who want to know how Holacracy works, we take a certain meeting. Mark Peter, a colleague of mine, does this, and takes something over. We have to discuss something there to show how it works, but it's very strict. Nobody speaks. You have to wait, and there's a moderator, and then you have a very strict logic, but it's extremely efficient, because meetings normally just take. I mean, if you want to lose energy, then you have to do a lot of meetings. People just want to do their work. And it works excellent. And the funny thing is, for those people who are interested in that, it's called Holacracy Safari, and then you can just come by and you can just join an actual meeting, and then we always hear, oh, that's excellent. We should also do this, but then the problem is that it's not so easy to integrate or to implement this in an organization, because in a totally different vertical organization with a manager whose, let's say, role is it not to do the work, but do all those meetings, it's difficult to implement it because you don't need this manager anymore.
You mentioned, and I should say that you have these check-ins and and a check-out on a meeting. I think it's a wonderful thing to implement even in your regular meetings when you do like a short check-in and ask how they are here, how they are present and in this meeting right now, so that people can give like a short information of what's going on in their lives right now.
Yeah.
And it makes you aware how people are sitting in the meeting, but also it makes you aware of what's going on in their lives, and it gives them also the opportunity to share and then relax, because now this is out in the open, and now you can just participate in the meeting. And also the same with the checkout, you get like an impression of how was the meeting, how did I feel afterwards. So I think it's a great addition to any meeting, even if you don't work in Holacracy, to add
Yeah.
like a short check-in, which is like just just 2 sentences, something that you say what's going on, and a checkout, and that's the same thing. Then you get a feeling. So how was the meeting? So going back to this thing you mentioned before, that in your organization everybody is a leader. How do you? Do you believe that leaders are trained? Do you believe that leaders are born as a leader? How do you find these leaders?
Yeah, I think we make this whole idea of a leader, we make it too big, and we make it too important. So I will just stay with this example of the credit department. If you just have 4 colleagues who do the same work, and this role or this responsibility of coordination is not huge, because those 4 people all do the same work, then everybody can have this role. But the more responsibilities you put in this kind of manager role, so one does the thinking and the rest does the work, and you split them. I mean, this is described in a lot of books, also books we discussed. Yeah, then you also get this attitude. I have a manager who does the thinking for me and tells me what to do, but that's not the way it works. At least not in our, let's say, in our company, or at least, I mean, depending on what you do. But even when you would have rather simple work, let's say if you would have a, let's say, agricultural stuff, then it still would make sense just to ask, okay, how would you do this or that, or would you have any ideas how we can work together in a better way, or etc., etc. But for instance, one very simple example is always who is going on holidays. If you just have a decentralized decision making, people start to discuss and say, yeah, no, you always want this month, but I also would like to have this month. And then, I mean, what will be the outcome? That one year you will be able to do so, and the other way around, or there is a kind of compromise, because somebody says, okay, my wife only can go then, and then it was okay, I understand, but we have to search for a solution, etc. But it's much better than that everybody says my manager has taken the decision, and then everybody is complaining about the manager because the holidays don't work. So I think it works. It works pretty well. And then if the leadership role is not such a big and important one, then it's much easier for everybody to just do this one by one.
But in a regular vertical organization, the manager has a lot of responsibility to make these decisions. So she or he knows what the conditions are, and what influences the decision, and what's the upper limit, what's the lower limit. For example, if you have like financial expenditure, how does somebody in your company make these decisions? How do they make decisions if you have no guidelines?
How do they make decisions? I think it's actually, the interesting thing is that we always, let's say, if you do these talks, if you work this way, then you always have to explain why it works. And I say it's very interesting. I would other ask people why it doesn't it work in the vertical organization. Just to take one example of recruiting, our teams recruit their colleagues themselves, and then I have to explain why does it work. And I can say, okay, I can tell you why it works because I take this credit team. It's a very actual, real example. So I have a credit team of 3 people. Uh, Probably, I don't know when this will be live. I mean, it's live now, so but it's not a secret. So a colleague of us will probably come back, and then those 3 people have said we would like to have this colleague back. And I say, it's your topic, it's not mine. I mean, if those 3 people want their colleague back, I mean, and it's very efficient because I don't have anything to do. It's okay, solve it. Perhaps you have perhaps a discussion. Okay, somebody has sent a new contract, etc. But or what will be the starting? We'll do the starting data, but there's no onboarding, etc. I mean, they will all solve it themselves. Or in this credit department, we started with 1 person, and then we needed a second one, and then Jeroen said, "Okay, I know, I would like to have this colleague," and then they just call a former colleague, and then we hired number 3, and then the 2 people said, no, we know somebody, we call a former colleague. And then so those kind of teams. But it's also, let's say, with our advisors, 50% of the people who started our company are people our own employees know. So they just call their friends and say, oh, we need somebody. And what's even more interesting is there is an enormous responsibility to call somebody and say, Erno, we need somebody, would you like to quit your current job? And it's an enormous responsibility, because how can you be sure that Erno will be much happier at Viisi? And then Erno comes home and says to his wife, yeah, one of my friends called, I should start at Viisi. Yeah, but Erno, are you really sure? So there's enormous responsibility involved. And then Erno joins the company, and these friends also have to think about, yeah, when it goes wrong. Internally, I have a problem because everybody said, how could you be so stupid to hire Erno? Or if it's not successful, and what will happen with the friendship with Erno? So and all those things, just one example, recruiting works excellently, or works in an excellent way, and then we have to explain why it works. I mean, I can explain how it works. I think it works much better than a company where an external HR team says, dear credit department, we hired somebody for you. We don't know anything about what you're really doing, but we hired somebody for you here. Or the manager says, I hired somebody for you. In the recruiting, let's say, application process, those 3 colleagues of the credit department all have a veto. So if somebody says, no, sorry, I don't know, maybe, but I know, sorry, he didn't impress me. Then it's no. So how shall I explain why this works? Because everybody has said yes, and then everybody feels responsible to make Erno successful. And if Erno would be a mishire, then they feel responsible to talk to Erno and say, Erno, I don't really understand. I thought your application process was brilliant. You made such a good impression. Why doesn't it work? And then somebody perhaps said, I thought mortgages would be much nicer and much more interesting than I thought, for instance. And then they will also say, okay, no problem at all. Erno, if you have come to a conclusion after 3 months or half a year that you thought mortgages would be much more interesting than it has been in the end, then no hard feelings, and then the stuff is also solved. And these are just actual things which just happen, because when we got these awards, Great Place to Work, Great Place to Work awards, were 4 times in a row number 1. When we got the first awards, or the second, the fluctuation went up, and we didn't understand. But that was because people they thought, oh, I need a really nice employer, and then they started and they forgot that it was about mortgage advice because they saw self-organization and radical transparency and transparent salaries and autonomy and then afterwards they found out, oh, mortgage advice, uh, that's something which I don't really like for the rest of my life.
You also mentioned the part where you say, okay, in this instance, the leaders come first. So when you had to downsize, at some point you said, as leaders, we don't take out any money for our own income.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's salary. So that sounds a lot like this book, Leaders Eat Last.
Yeah. Yeah, Simon Sinek.
Right. This is something that you really feel is really important, how you organize things, that leaders take responsibility, and when the going gets tough, they take responsibility, and when it's easy, to give away the responsibility. They share the responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and it's because it's also not correct, and everybody understands this. So, I would say it's it's just common understanding. So I would say the opposite is very difficult to accept for everybody. So just take a classical example in the Netherlands. You have KLM or other companies in during COVID time, and then they lay off people and they give themselves bonuses. Nobody understands this. So there the question is again, why should I explain that it's more decent to first stop your own salary and then lay off, and not and it's difficult to understand or accept for people that you lay off people and then pay yourself a bonus. Or in the KLM case, the bonus was connected to the amount of subsidies they would get. I mean, how crazy can you invent such thing? I mean, it's just unethical. It's not decent. I mean, in the past, in the Middle Ages, they just would have killed you somewhere on the way. I mean, we live in more decent times, perhaps, but nobody understands this. So, and that's, I mean, this. I mean, we have this. We don't have handbooks. We have this one golden rule: treat other people like you wanted to be treated yourself. So I would always say, I mean, if you work for KLM and you're laid off, perhaps even especially people who have worked there for 20 years, how would you feel when you're laid off and you read in the newspaper that the one who laid you off have given himself a bonus of a couple of million? I don't know. I mean, nobody understands this. So I think most of the stuff we do is very normal, very logic, very decent, and most people behave like that. The book of Rutger Bregman, meeste mensen deugen. I don't know the title in English. So the most people are just helping each other, and that's also what you see from anthropology. If somebody wants to cross the street and somebody sees this, everybody helps this person to cross the street. So we are not egoistic. Our DNA is not egoistic. No, we are altruistic. That's our DNA, and that's why if you see on social media, the most likes are always on empathetic, altruistic posts. Somebody saving a cat or a small elephant somewhere. Enormous amount of likes. Why? Because people are empathetic, and people dislike this egoistic approach.
So this is a podcast about better leaders, about leadership, and how to become a better leader in your organization. And it sounds like I'm just sharing, to be clear. There's no question at the end. It sounds like it's so different, this situation, and for you as a listener to understand is that everybody's a leader. Anybody can be a leader. There's rotation in the roles of leadership of a team. Anybody can make decisions. A team can make decisions. Everybody has veto. So there's so much going on that's so contrary to what we've been told, which is the norm, like a vertical organization where there's a lot of documentation, a lot of control, a lot of checking if you do the right thing. where if you have like this holacracy kind of situation, there's a lot of trust. It's more like Rhinelandic, as we call it. There's a lot of trust. We trust the experienced people that they do the right thing. Also, like you just mentioned, the golden rule that helps them to do the right thing. So the question then for you as a listener is, if you think about leadership, if you think about leaders in your organization, do you think about the managers, or do you think about anybody who could be a leader? And how could you improve that situation to make anybody to become a leader in your organization? I think that's a really important thing. So I want to close this up. I'm going to share the QR code of you, Tom, on LinkedIn. So if people want to connect with you, find you, look you up, I think the best place to do is on LinkedIn. You can also find the company Viisi there, but all the other stuff that Tom is doing as well. And I think just scan the QR code, you go directly to his LinkedIn profile. Also, I have the URL at the bottom now, so you can watch it too. Is there anything that you want to add that I didn't ask, Tom?
Yeah, two things. Everybody who wants to connect, feel free to do so. And the second thing is that if somebody wants to dive in certain topics, which we discussed, all the stuff, let's say all the talks, all the presentations is all online. It's all part of Radical Transparency. So if somebody wants to know something about Radical Transparency, or about salaries, about decentralized decision making, about being more human, etc., you can just Google it, and then you probably will find something which is specific to your needs. Because there's just so much stuff around.
Yeah. So, like always, we will publish this on Monday, next Monday, on blog.coachdotme. Actually, this will change and will be on betterhumans.me, to be sure, to be clear. We are still in a changing process, but this is moving to betterhumans.me. And for now, thank you for listening, watching us. And if you want to join in live next time, every Friday at 9 a.m. Central and 4 p.m. Central European time, then you'll be joining us live and can ask us questions when we're having this conversation. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Erno.